Welcome to Brainstem. I'm Matt, and this is Saksham, and today we'll be talking about memory decay. So first, let's talk about what memory actually is. So memory is the process of storing experiences in the brain and recalling them at some other time. People use their memories during every moment of their lives. We have to remember words and ideas to speak or write, and we even hold memories of just fun things that we did in the past. All humans have memories, and animals even have them too. So now let's talk about how many items we can store in our heads at one time. So, well, when we can't remember something, it's called forgetting. And a big reason that people forget items is simply that a lot of time has passed between when they first learned that item and when they try to recall it. Also, people forget things that they just don't practice often. And there are also diseases of the brain that can impact memory as well, and that can make us forget things more often as well. But typically, we can remember 7 plus or minus 2 items at a time in our short-term memory. So now let's talk about what happens to these things that we forget. So in general, people don't like to forget memories. Like, it's never fun when you can't remember something on an exam, or you forget about this fun experience you had a long time ago. But at the same time, forgetting does serve important purposes. The brain forgets information that it no longer needs by breaking down connections between brain cells that are not being used. This way, the brain is open to learning new info. There was a German psychologist called Hermann Ebbinghaus. He developed this curve here that's called the Ebbinghaus Forgetting curve. Like we said before, people can forget things because just a long time has passed from when they first learned that thing. And this is actually the most common reason for loss of memories. And here we see that people can actually forget a lot really fast. But as you go on, the amount you forget kind of stays the same. It doesn't really change after a certain period of time. In future slides, we'll go over how this happens.
So let's go over some of the basics on how new memories are formed. So memories cause chemical changes in the neurons, which are basically nerve cells or brain cells in our brain. And the chemical changes create what are called memory paths. And so these memory paths can remain in the brain for seconds or even for a person's entire life. And so in other words, our brain is basically rewiring itself every time we learn something new and every time we get a new memory. So how can we remember more items? So Matt was talking about how we can forget things really quickly, and we saw the Ebbinghaus curve. So what can we do to remember more things at once? So there are a number of tricks that we can use to remember more items, right? So some of these things include like mnemonics, the peg word method, chunking, spaced repetition, and the method of loci. And so a really common practice is something called spaced repetition. And that can really prevent the Ebbinghaus curve from happening completely. So as you can see on the picture on the right side here, you can notice that we aren't actually reviewing something after a set number of days. Instead, what we're doing is we're increasing the time between each review session. And this actually helps us retain our memory a lot better. So that's called spaced repetition, where we're sort of interrupting the Ebbinghaus curve and preventing us from fully forgetting something. Another great trick is mnemonics. I'm sure like we've all used mnemonics in our math class, right? Like when we're trying to learn about order of operations, right? A really common mnemonic is, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, to remember the order of operation rule of parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication, then division, addition, and then followed by subtraction. Another great mnemonic that is really common is for remembering the cardinal direction, north, south, east, and west. A lot of people will say like never eat soggy waffles, right? So that's like a great way to remember just basic things. And another way that people can remember memory a lot better is through songs and melodies. And so you may remember when you were a lot younger in kindergarten, when we learned our ABCs, we had the ABC song, right? And that sort of helped us remember the ABCs a lot better as well. So lastly, we'll talk about short-term and long-term memory, right? So short-term memory is a way to store information temporarily, right? It lasts about maybe 15 to 30 seconds. And the way short-term memory sort of works is that, it takes in a lot of information from our senses, right? And that goes into our short-term memory. It stays there for a couple of seconds. And then after some time, we begin to start storing information for longer periods of time. And that goes into our long-term memory. So an example of short-term memory would be like, keeping a phone number in mind while after looking it up and then dialing it immediately after, right? So you just go right in our short-term memory, we remember it for a very short period of time, and we use that memory right then and there. Long-term memory is a little bit different, right? It can happen over, it can last days, months, or even a lifetime. And so the way that it works is that, repeating and practicing motions or tasks help the brain to store that information for a longer period of time. And if a person dials like a telephone number, for example, many, many times, that number will then move from our short-term memory to eventually our long-term memory. And then we'll actually remember that information for a longer period of time. And that's what we call rehearsal, right? And we can see that in our picture right here. Yeah, thank you so much for listening to our lecture, and we hope you learned something new today.